Okay. Hi, everyone. This is SmithyQ from SmithyQ.com, and today I'm trying something a little bit different. I've created my first ever YouTube video. I'm analyzing a chess game from one of my blog readers. And he was white, and he reached this position out of the opening. It was a Sicilian, as you can probably tell. And here, his main question, what he was looking at, is he played a really interesting idea, where he sacrificed a piece for 2 pawns. So let's see if I can put it on the board. Here we go. Pawn, take, 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 reaching this position. And then he took the knight. And so what do you think? White better? Black better? How can you tell? Because the position has suddenly changed completely by looking back these 3 moves here. This is a standard Sicilian position, right? Both sides have activity, both sides are doing things. We got the standard plans that are going to be happening. Perhaps black is a bit better because he's got a really strong knight, but his king is stuck in the center as well. So, pros and cons. After this, the situation has changed completely. Black's king is still stuck in the center, but now white has 3 connected passed pawns, which should be absolutely killer in the endgame. So, can black survive? Is black better? He's up a piece. How can you tell? This is a very common situation, and it's a very hard situation because the material is imbalanced. It's pieces for pawns. And in this case, it's only 2 pawns for the piece, so black is ahead in material. However, that material is 3 connected passed pawns. These are by far the hardest situations to analyze or determine or to evaluate in chess, when there's a material imbalance, when there's a sacrifice, when both sides have different strengths, because they do have very different strengths here. So before I answer this particular question, I would like to back up, and I want to look at 2 cases in which it is definitely a good idea. No question. So still in Sicilian, there's a common line in the Sveshnikov variation. So I'm just going to go here, right? Very common opening at Grandmaster level here. And if you've noticed, it's been 10 moves, and black has made about 80 pawn moves, and he has 1 piece developed. And so this gives white a chance, or an idea, to sacrifice for the pawns. What does white get in this situation? He still has those pawns, right? Only 2 of them are the pass pawns because of the d pawn. But in this case, the pawns don't really matter. What matters is that white has got 2 beautiful knights. Black cannot stop a knight c7 check, and his king is going to be chased around. One line, just so we could sort of see what might happen. Black tries to get out of the check. The check comes in. Sorry, gets out of the fork. Now the queen comes in, and the computer says that black can probably survive this. Stockfish says it's like 0.016 in favor of white after thinking for a long time. But when you look at this position, would you rather be black or would you rather be white? Black's king is terrible. All his pieces are on the back rank. White can win another pawn, right? You can always play knight e6, discover check, pick up a pawn here. He can castle. Black has no threats. Even if we exchange off into the endgame, again, the pass pawns make it very difficult for black, right? I know who I would rather be. So the reason, and this is just one possible line. Of course, there's many. It's been analyzed in depth. I believe theory says that it's been analyzed to a draw. I'm not sure. But the idea is black's suffering. And the reason black is suffering, why it's so unpleasant, is because of the immediate activity. Because white gets beautiful knights and an immediate initiative. Black has no counterplay at all. He cannot use his extra piece. He's too busy defending. So this is the first case in which sacrificing pieces for pawns is a good idea. for 2 or 3 pawns is because you get the immediate activity, the immediate initiative. Another example of this same idea is from perhaps the most favorite, it's a favorite, the most famous chess game perhaps ever played, be Paul Morphy's The Opera Game, in which, in this position, Morphy famously sacrifices his knight for 2 pawns. And what does he get? Again, it's not the pawns, it's not an endgame pass-pawn advantage, it's Black is completely tied down. White is dominating. His pieces are amazing. Black cannot make a threat. And in fact, Black just gets destroyed just a few moves later in an absolutely beautiful game, which started with White realizing in this position he's got such a big lead in development, he's got so much activity where he can afford to sacrifice. Right? And again, a piece for 2 pawns isn't that much of a sacrifice. It's basically giving up 1 pawn's worth of material. And when you have this position where Black is tied down, Black can do nothing, then clearly it's a good idea. Or it's something worth exploring. So this is the first case in which sacrificing pieces for pawns is a good idea. Immediate activity, where your activity soars, you've got an initiative, you've got the attack. There's another case in which I'm going to share a game that I played back in 2013. It was a Scotch. It reached this position in which I chose to sacrifice a piece for 2 pawns. The threat here is knight takes c7, so Black is forced to do this. And then Black made a mistake. He took with the queen. Where if he took with the pawn instead, and he kept the queens on, he has great chances to keep the advantage. But he took with the queen, because he thought, alright, White has sacrificed a piece, so I'm going to go to the endgame. But this is a mistake, for a couple of reasons. One, I'm able to simply win this pawn. There's nothing you can do about it. So it's 3 pawns for the piece, I'm not even down material, really. And in the endgame, the pawn's power increases. So the less pieces there are, the stronger the pawns are. And again, I've got 3 connected pawns, 2 of them are passed, 8 pawns is gonna roll. And what's gonna happen is Black doesn't play very well. He doesn't respond to my threats, and in fact, I'm able to get an easy fork, and the pawns decide the game pretty quickly. All right. So what Black's mistake is that he immediately went to the endgame. Right? He had no threats. His extra piece couldn't do anything. Again, he had no activity, and my pawns were able to roll very, very quickly. Another thing to look at is in this position, look at the direction my pieces go, look at the direction his pieces go. All right? My rook goes forward. All right? He tries to go forward, it's not working. All right? He's just moving back side to side. He tries to move his knight forward. Oh, he gets kicked back. His rook gets kicked back. His knight moves back. All right? My pawns keep moving forward. My bishop goes forward. My rook goes forward. My pieces are moving forward, and his couldn't. This often tells us what is happening in the chess game. Whoever side, if you can force someone to retreat, you're probably doing better. If your pieces are advancing, you're doing better. If you can advance and force your opponent to retreat, you've got a very big advantage. So these are the 2 cases in which sacrificing pieces for the pawns generally work. If you can get an immediate initiative, or you can get an immediate endgame, where the pawns work tremendously. So let's go back to your game. So let's see where the position is. Right here. So let's look at this. Do you get immediate activity? Sorry, let's go one more square. Is there an initiative against the king? Not really. Your rook is on the open file, but it's hard to do anything. It's hard to coordinate your other pieces there. Even if you double. Okay? This bishop is always eyeing it, right? At the very and the rook is guarding the knight, so you can't go through the knight. At the very least, he could drop back with his rook here as well. So not a lot is going to happen. Also, if you move your rooks to the f-file, then they're not using your strength, your pawns. So the initiative against the king isn't happening. Black's king is surprisingly well protected. The second question, is this an endgame? Can you trade queens right away, or can you trade a whole bunch of pieces? And again, the answer is no. There's no easy way to trade anything. It's not possible. There's a lot of pieces, and the more pieces there are, the less powerful pawns are. So this gives us an indication that this sacrifice might not be correct. And then here's the final piece, is which direction are the pieces moving? Okay, so you played king h1, getting out of potential checks, which is a good idea. Black moves his bishop out, attacking the e4 pawn. You retreat to defend it. He brings his king over. You retreat to defend your e-pawn. And we'll see now black is now getting a big concentration of forces going towards your king side. This can come in. This can come over. And all of a sudden, white's retreating. Black's getting activity. It looks like black is better. And in fact, black is better. Going back, could you do anything to improve from, let's see, this position? Not really, because you need to move these pieces out of the way so that way your pawns can advance. Like, you need it. If you just try and advance one of these pawns by themselves, it's not going to do anything. These pieces have no good forward squares, and so you have nothing really better than bishop d3 and knight d2. Keeping control of e4, which is absolutely essential, because if this pawn were to fall or move, well, then this bishop is lined right up, and the rooks are soon going there as well, right? So we've got lots of pressure. It's very uncomfortable. And then when you make this g3 move, which makes some sense because you want to stop the pressure from the rooks, well then, now the bishop has got extra, the open diagonal is very, very unpleasant, perhaps more unpleasant. And you try and use your pawns, but black's piece activity just becomes, it's too great. And he's got sacrifices lined up. Knight takes h2 is always in the cards, because then g3 is going to fall right after. Knight e3 looks devastating. The f5 advance, which is going to pry open that diagonal. Black has too many threats. And he has, by definition, because you gave up a piece for pawns, he has more pieces in the attack. And also, because these pieces are defending e4, they can't defend the king side. And so black's kingside activity is just, it's too strong. And you try and defend. You defend fairly well given the circumstances, right? But it's too much. So if we go here, is this sacrifice? Is this a good idea? It was something worth exploring. However, we should have realized, okay, let's look ahead 2 moves. The 2 things. Do you get immediate activity against his king? Do you get an easy attack? No. Do you stop his pieces from moving forward? No. Can you get to an immediate endgame? No. So those are 3 strikes, which tells us this is probably not a good idea. And in fact, it isn't. A bit of something worth exploring. What should you have done? The game should have probably gone on like a standard Sicilian. So it'd be standard moves. You'd probably want to play king h1 at some point. Stopping again, eventual checks. Whoops. I'm really good at drawing arrows. I'm sorry. Bishop g3 would make sense because it opens the file and it's blunting the rook. You want to get this rook into the game, so you might want to think about either a3 to stop the pawn going forward, or you could play a4, trying to open the line. Rook goes over to the d file. These are the candidate moves, and nothing's really forcing here. The better player is going to win. It's a roughly equal position. But I want to go back. I want to look at something, because you played the opening incredibly well. So, especially considering the strength of your opponent. The black player, Mr. Pennings, he is a national master with an unbelievable 2,600 bullet rating. So he is incredible. I mean, I don't know what my bullet rating is. I don't think I've ever played bullet, but it's 1 minute. Okay. But the idea is, if you look at this game, right? I'm not sure if this is theory or what it is, but this is fantastic. His bishop moved early. You attack the g-pawn, and then you retreat. Because otherwise, if you played a normal move, you'd be able to play knight f6, and the time it takes for you to move your king, he could castle. But you don't let that. You move the queen by yourself, right? And now, as soon as he plays knight f6, your bishop comes in, and you stop him from castling. And then this, rook g8. Black might have some ideas of playing g5 and trying to trap your bishop, right? f4, queen c7. So up to now, you played absolutely fantastic. You've got an advantage. In fact, you've got a fairly big advantage because black's king is stuck in the center. This rook is doing nothing. As long as the g-file stays closed, you're essentially playing up a piece, up a rook. And your rook can easily come to this square or this square and put the pressure on, right? One of these files is going to open up. You've got an advantage. But then you rushed. You played f5 here. And this has two problems. One, as I was saying, as long as the g-file is closed, this rook is out of the game. Black can now take it. He's got an open file. And again, a very common idea in the Sicilian is to play either b6 or b5, and the bishop comes here, and now we've got a coordinated attack down here on g2. Exactly what black wants, right? And that's essentially what happens at the end of the game, right? Is that it's this pressure from the g-file and the bishop which ultimately costs you. The second unfortunate fact of f5 is that it gives up the e5 square. And black, that's actually what he does, right? Is that he brings his knight in, and his knight cannot be kicked away from the square. It's beautiful, it's eternal, it's immediately the best piece in the game. And then after you took, black has solved his problem. His rook is on an open file, he's got a beautiful knight, his bishop's going to come over. If he was able to castle, black would be much better. Because he can't, because his king is stuck here, he's... the position's more equal. You've got chances. In fact, black always has to be careful, because if he gets too crazy with some of his kingside attack, right? Maybe he tries to play f5, well, that's going to be opening his king up, right? So again, a dynamically balanced position, black probably has the better chances. So let's go back. Instead of f5, you had, again, a couple of options. One option is... a bit more positional in nature, something like bishop g5. Because what's it doing? It's immediately stopping the g-pawn from moving. Okay, and an idea is, if you can ever trade this bishop, he's got weak squares, this pawn becomes much, much weaker, you can gang up on that. Right? Oh, sorry, that was a little... I'll ignore that. Maybe I'll edit that out. Pawn is much weaker. But you have a better move. And computer analysis agreed with this, is rook a e1. So you bring your last piece into the attack, it's staring at the king, he can't castle, right? And then, if he tries to play the normal Sicilian move, instead of playing f5, you play e5. You're going to open the position up. You're going to crush him. He doesn't want to exchange, because that's going to open the f-file, right? It's not a pawn sacrifice, you've got all the protection there. He doesn't want to go like knight d5. In fact, knight d5 would be a terrible mistake. e6. You're going to crush on in. Your e-file is opening up. Everything is complete disaster for black. So he would need to move his knight somewhere else, like h5. And then, we look at this move. Double exclamation mark. And you're absolutely crushing in this position. Now, I'm not going to lie, the variations are complex and amazing. The simple idea is that if he takes with this pawn, you got knight d5, and the pressure on e7 is too much. If he takes the g-pawn, at the very least, you could simply win the knight. Oh, that's easy. But the computer suggests an even better move, queen f3. And the complications are immense. You can look at it with your computer. I'm not going to get into it very much here, but the idea is we bring the knight in now. It's attacking the queen. It can't be taken because disaster on f7 then follows. And then in the following position, white emerges clearly up a piece, and there's no pressure because this bishop is stopping it. White's doing amazing. And in fact, he can start sacrificing for the initiative now. And it says white is up like +5. Again, an incredibly complex position. I'm not saying this is easy. I'm not, but it's a possibility. And it shows you how strong your position was out of the opening, where the computer says if you had played rook a e1 instead, and then played e5, after here, you're winning. And this is against, again, a person with a 2600 bullet rating, against someone who's a national master, right? So you played fantastic, and that you got lost in the complications, that happens to us all. And so just to recap, again, if we go through the game, excuse me, right here, was the bishop takes b5 idea, or the knight takes b5, was it worth exploring? Yes. Yes, it was. Right? I mean, you should always look at forcing moves. However, two general rules. Either an immediate initiative, so an immediate attack, or an immediate endgame, where we can actually use those pawns. Because neither of those happened, and we sort of got this mixed position where we don't stop his activity, we don't have an attack against the king, and we don't have an easy endgame, that suggests that black is doing better, and he is. He's got a winning position. All right? And then that's where you resigned. Okay? So I hope you found that helpful. I hope you found that useful, gives you some ideas. So that way the next time you have this potential for sacrifices, for pieces against two pawns, you can sort of look through that checklist and think, all right, does it tick these boxes? If it ticks all three boxes, you get immediate activity, you stop his activity, and you can get to an endgame, it's probably a winning idea. Even if it only ticks two of the boxes, very worth exploring. If it's one or none, think long and hard. Do you have a better move? Okay, so that's going to do it for now. Again, I'm SmithyQ from SmithyQ.com. This is my first chess video. Please tell me if you liked it, if you enjoyed it, if you learned something. Tell me if I can improve it to do something. I want to make this, the best I can. Okay, so again, check out my blog, SmithyQ.com, and thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.